If your creative push has helped you, you can help out the show by shopping on Amazon. Just head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right to Amazon.com and you can do your shopping. It won't cost you anything extra, and a percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping to host your creative push. And especially with the holidays coming up, you can make a big difference just by buying the stuff that you were going to buy anyway. Again, the link is yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. And thank you so much for thinking about the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 313.
Art is basically a culmination of your entire life presented in a physical object.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Jordan Hill. Jordan is an illustrator and storyteller with a focus on characters and connections, and she has created this wonderful world called the World of Immensum. This was an idea that was born around 7 years ago when an idea for a book series took on a mind of its own. Every short story, novel, or illustration that she creates takes place in the same universe, with their placement in that universe depending on the planet, the location of the planet, the time period it takes place in, or even the particular sub-timeline or alternate universe it is a part of. It's a crazy thing to think about, and she comes on the show today to describe that universe and where those initial ideas came from. She also talks about navigating the in-between of being equally left and right-brained, but wanting to fully pursue art. Jordan also talks about how she was able to double down on NaNoWriMo while she was taking on college courses and holding a job, and how she always feels happier and more fulfilled when she is creating and also exercising. She also talks about embracing her joy for comic book style art and the way in which our interests, our past, and our previous styles all come together to create our own unique voice, which cannot be copied by anybody else. Jordan and I also discuss how ideas often come in great numbers as you are creating and the importance of writing down all of those ideas. And finally, Jordan talks about her goal of trying new things and putting herself out there and how you have to be comfortable with being bad at the things that you like. I had a great time talking with Jordan, and this is a discussion that will really help you if you have trouble tapping into your own emotions and figuring out what direction you need to go in, both with your art and with your potential career, and also for realizing that the myriad of ideas that you get while you're creating, that's not a bad thing, and it shouldn't overwhelm you, and you can actually find ways to incorporate all of those ideas into what you're already doing. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Jordan Hill. Jordan, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I always like to give my guests the opportunity at the start to give a brief history, sort of a creative bio, how you got to the point you are today.
Yeah, so I've always been creative as long as I can remember, and even before I can remember. My mom tells a story about how when I was so young that I couldn't even talk, she would put me in my high chair and she would give me crayons and paper, and I would never draw on anything except for the paper. And when she would take me out to take care of me, I would cry because I just liked to do creative things so much. And I think my entire life there's been this kind of in between where I've been very evenly spread between right-brained and left-brained. I have always been creative, but I've also always said that math was my favorite subject. And so as I got older, I think although my family wasn't speaking negatively of creative careers, my dad was actually a graphic designer in t-shirt design my entire childhood. But for some reason, I just got it into my brain that I couldn't do art as my career. And so I thought, well, what's the best way to balance my art and the mathematical side? And I thought engineering. So for a while, I wanted to be an engineer ever since probably high school. I would say I was a freshman. And then as I got older, I started to get into some college classes and I did a internship, and I really did not like it in the way that I thought I would. And so at one point, I just thought, I want to do art, and I can incorporate my own left-brained thoughts, my mathematics, and my more structured approach to things, but I can put that in the context of my art instead of what other people think that I should do. So, yeah, it was just that point where I was ready to move on, I guess.
Right. And then from that point, what were some of the decisions that you made when you decided to like not be in between anymore, to kind of like go for it and not define yourself by the stories that you or other people have told you before? Like what were the first steps that you took?
Well, for a while I was working in a kitchen, and that was actually my first job. I turned 18 and I got my first job, which was a little late to be my first job, but it was in a kitchen and it was very intense. And for my specific personality, it was far too intense. And there were some situations with scheduling and being overworked. And I worked there for about a year and a half. And after about a year, the last 6 months were very, very difficult, and they got very intense. I fell into a kind of pretty intense depression, and I just realized that though I was trying to work for other people and follow what they wanted and basically save up money to do college, even the college courses I was taking weren't giving me what I needed. You know, I had taken a couple of online classes, and the problem with the online classes was there were no lectures, there were no real teacher interactions. Basically, I was paying hundreds of dollars to teach myself college level algebra. And I had this moment where I just thought, why am I paying money for them to give me a grade when I could just buy the book and teach myself? And that, I think, was the moment where I thought that maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do, because it was very frustrating to me. And I've never been the kind of person to want to go to college just to go. I know a lot of people do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I always said that if I went to college, I wanted to know what I wanted to go for before I went. I didn't want to figure it out while I was there, because it just felt like a waste of money to me. But after I had done a few classes, I thought, this isn't great. Just because of how stressed I was doing the cooking job and college at the same time. And at one point when I was working and taking college classes, I participate in NaNoWriMo. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do. I've done it.
Okay. Yes. It's great. I've been doing it every year since I was 13. So,
and for anybody listening that doesn't know, it's writing National Novel Writing Month. Is that right?
Yes.
And so it's writing a book essentially in 1 month.
Yes. It's 50,000 words is the kind of suggested amount, though different people do different amounts. And I had this moment where I was working and I was doing college courses at the same time during November. And I thought, I might not be able to do it this year, but I had been doing it for, I guess, probably 7 years at that point in a row. And I didn't want to not do it. So instead of just giving up, I actually wrote more that year than I had ever written, and I wrote 200,000 words instead of 50,000. Yeah. So
oh my God.
Just really stubborn. And so when I thought that I might not be able to do it, I just put every ounce of my spare energy and free time into it.
Now, I got to stop you there and ask you, like, how you're able to do that. Because, like, I think, I use this, I still use this excuse to this day. Like my wife always yells at me that I'm always saying how I don't have enough time. And like, especially when you have a lot of different projects that you want to do and a lot of things like on your plate on top of work
Yes.
or school and all that
Yes.
stuff. So like, how did you find that time to like squeeze, or not even like squeeze out a book, like essentially create like 4x your efforts?
Right. I think for me, it is just every moment I had, I was writing. So if I had 5 minutes between when I got ready for work and when I went to work, I would write. And I did actually wake up several hours before I went to work. And that was just something I always did. I always said that if I was going to be working in a kitchen with knives and hot surfaces, I wanted to be fully awake for it. So I would always be awake 2 hours before I had to be there. And sometimes that meant being up at 4:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave me time to have some space and wake up. And during November, I was writing during that time as well. But yeah, it was just a matter of making up my mind, because once I've decided that I'm going to do something, I'm pretty adamant about it.
Right. It's getting that mindset shift, not being, like you said before, in between, deciding, all right, this is what I want, making that mental decision, but then it has to be something that you really want as well.
It does,
so that you are able to wake up early and you are able to like literally devote all of your spare time to it, to put away all the distractions. But the waking up thing has been something that's been helping me recently. Mm-hmm. It's like such a hack to just give yourself that extra time. It's just like found time. And not only that, but it's like during your most productive hours, like when your brain is the most focused and you have the most energy and you have the most motivation, so that you can put all of like those like good hours into that thing that you really care about. And then maybe you'll be a little bit more tired when you're at work around knives and stuff.
Exactly.
But at least you've kind of put yourself in a better mindset. Did that help, like being able to do that and being able to like kind of really go hardcore, continue to keep your streak alive for NaNoWriMo, and also like start along your like artistic journey? Did that help then with the depression that you were feeling?
To a certain extent it did, but it was really the situation of the work environment that was causing the depression. I still struggle with things like that to this day, even though I'm not in that environment anymore. But I do think that being creative and doing those types of things, also exercising, really helps. Mm. And that's always been the case for me as long as I can remember. Even when I was probably maybe 9-10 years old, I remember if I didn't do something creative, I would feel bad. And looking back, it probably was, to a certain extent, a depression. But I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to call it. But if I was creative, then I felt better. And so I do think that writing and drawing and things like that do help me cope to a certain extent. And I definitely notice a distinct difference when I don't.
Right. It's trying to have kind of your finger on the pulse of your brain, of the way that you feel and your emotions, and trying to not just get that information, but to use it and to try to like get into healthier, better habits and patterns, so that you can try to limit those feelings, which I think we all get. But of course, for anybody listening, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't seek help if you need it.
No, absolutely not. You definitely should.
So then let's get into your art. Let's talk about the art that you started to create then when you decided to go for it, and where that led you.
Yeah. Okay. So I've always been a fan of comic book style art, kind of art that is not quite realism, but not quite cartoons, just somewhere in the middle. And I've gone through multiple phases throughout the years. I think a lot of people have. Mm-hmm. When I was probably 13-ish, I got a sketchbook and some markers and a manga drawing book for Christmas. So I had a little manga anime phase. And then when I got into high school, I thought, well, now I want to draw realism. I want to draw realistic art. And I was never really great at realism, but I tried. And I also was very bad at finishing things. I was looking through some of my art the other day from back in high school, and I have piles of things that I tried to do realistic drawings of, and they're just half finished, right? And then as I got older, I thought, well, why am I trying to draw realism? Am I doing it because that's what I think people want to see, or am I doing that because that's what I actually want to do? Because there are some people that genuinely enjoy that, but I wasn't enjoying it. So I wanted to do something that I would enjoy. And there is value, I think, in realism for even cartoon artists in understanding how things work and getting a grasp of the basics. But once I started to explore more comic book style art, is basically what I call it, I really started to enjoy it and I wanted to do it more. And I've also always liked things that are kind of dark, not super dark, but just at first glance, you're like, oh, that's a nice thing. And then you look a little closer and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. That's kind of dark. And I've recently started doing some art shows, or not really art shows, like craft fairs and things like that, where I'm setting up a booth and selling my art. And there's always that moment, and it's really fun to see it in person, where either someone likes it or they don't. Because there's a moment where they're looking at it and they're like, oh, that's pretty. And then they notice that it's kind of dark. And some people get really excited and really like pumped about it. And other people like get kind of like weirded out and they leave.
Run away.
Yeah. And it always makes me laugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started to explore kind of things like that. And I guess I'm kind of inspired by a lot of things, but surrealism has always been something that is intriguing to me. And though I'm not quite realism, I think I'm still inspired by surrealism. So a lot of times I will draw weird, strange things in a way that is presented as normal, I guess.
Right. Well, and I think, like you said, everybody goes through their phases, and it's, I think it's important to do that too. Like, to not get stuck in one thing because that's what you've been doing for the past year, 10 years, whatever it may be. Like, to just go with whatever feels right. Was that ever difficult for you, like, to move past something and then still want to bring pieces of the previous phases along the journey with you and incorporate them into your new phases?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that is a part of life, you know, it is part of life to go through phases and move on. And I definitely still see influences from my previous work. You know, I had my anime manga phase, and I still think there is a certain amount of that is still in my art. You don't look at it and think, well, that's anime art or manga art. You don't think that because, well, maybe some people do, but I don't. But, you know, it is part of it. I think art is basically a culmination of your entire life presented in a physical object. So things that I've enjoyed throughout my life will make appearances in my artwork. You know, I really enjoy in my life, I do martial arts, Taekwondo.
Nice.
So I've been doing that for years. And so it does kind of make its way into some of my novels. You know, I will write about characters that know how to fight, or I'll draw characters that are fighting, or things like that. So I think art is basically your life, but presented in a way that other people can understand. And that's why art tends to be so unique and specific to the people that made it. And the reason that nobody can quite make the art that one person can make is because those people haven't experienced the same things and went through the same interests and situations and, all of that. So even if someone were to try to draw in someone's style, it might not come across as being true to them because that's someone else's life. That's not their life.
Exactly. And that's why, like, when you get influenced by somebody and you try to emulate their style, like, because you're so inspired by them, and you realize that it's not quite the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same because I do this differently. You should like lean into those changes. Like you should embrace those changes because that's like your, like you said, like your reality. Like that's your style, and that's where things are going to go for you.
Absolutely.
So you've created something pretty crazy. So I was hoping you could tell us about World of Immensum, like how that started. Because when you talk about starting a new style or a new project or a new thing, like this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is a lot. So Can you explain it?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, the World of Immensum, it started when I was in high school. I remember the day that I came up with the idea. I was in American history class, and I just had this spark of an idea for a book series. And basically, I spent the entire class period writing notes, quote unquote. And probably the teacher thought I was taking notes on the class, but I was actually taking notes on the story idea I had. And basically, the World of Immensum is all of my artwork and all of my stories taking place within the same universe. So I had this thought that any story idea I could possibly have could theoretically exist within the confines of the same environment based on the planet that it took place on or the period of time. And I've recently introduced alternate realities. So perhaps on the same planet at the same time, with the same people, something else is happening. And I think this, to a certain extent, was based on the fact that I do love math and science and kind of left-brained stuff. It was just my way of saying, okay, I can approach this universe in a more kind of theoretical way. So when I make artwork, sometimes it's stated explicitly as being on this planet at this time. Sometimes it's something that I have in my head and haven't put into the world. But anything that I've drawn or anything that I've written is inside of that universe. I think for me, it's kind of just for my own enjoyment. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, I guess, because if you don't go to my website and you don't look at all of the information, you might not even notice. But I think in real life, there's a lot of very strange connections. You hear about people that met each other years prior to when they actually officially met, where they ran into each other. And then later they're married and they find photographs of them together or something. And that happens in real life. So I thought, well, why can't I do that with my own fiction? So I think to a certain extent, it was just something that I thought was interesting about life. And so I wanted to kind of emulate that with my own work.
Right. Like it's so true that those connections happen. I love those kind of synchronicities. Even my wife and I had that same exact story where she was dating like somebody that I was friends with and I was dating somebody that she was friends with. We happened to have like driven an hour in the same car to a concert together, but like never really like talked so much. And then years later, like we actually, like you said, like met in real life, like,
Yeah.
you know, where you actually like see the person for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then we got married.
I love those kinds of things.
But so when you kind of try to put all of your artwork into this, well, I don't even want to say constraints because there's, you have, you know, different planets, different time periods, different whatever. Like, but does it ever, do you ever feel kind of like constrained whenever you are sitting down to create something?
That's a very good question, actually. Yes, I think that sometimes I do, because, like you said, there are those sorts of constraints, I guess. But, you know, it is one of those things where if I want something to happen on the same planet at the same time with the same people, I can just say, oh, it's just another reality. Like, you know, so I think I can sometimes get caught up in that, where I think, well, this wouldn't happen in this scenario with these people because of this, this, and this. But for the most part, I think it is just something that I personally find enjoyment out of, so I don't necessarily get intimidated by it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, then, do you ever sit down to create something and then feel like this has to like fit in somewhere? Like, I need to make this like more epic. Does that ever get into your thought process, or
yeah?
Do you just like are you still able to just create and draw something because you want to draw it, or write about something because you want to write about it?
I think that does happen, actually. There definitely are situations where I want to write something, but before I write it, I need to know where it goes. Where I'll think of an idea and I'll think, oh, this is cool. I am having a lot of fun with this. But I have timelines that I made. You know, I will try to squeeze things in, and sometimes the dates get mixed up, where things feel like way too crammed. And so I'll have to reevaluate and think, okay, well, if this is happening at this point and I want it to happen in this timeline specifically, then I have to change stuff. I have to think of different ways that it can fit in, I guess. But to me, that's actually kind of fun. So even though it can kind of set me back with the actual drawing and writing, sometimes just making the timelines is enjoyable. So it's not really that big of a deal because it's just another creative outlet.
Yeah, I know for some people, and myself included, with some of the projects that I do, it's like helpful almost to have constraints or to have some sort of rules in place or some sort of guidelines, because for a lot of people, the fear of the blank canvas is huge. So if you can kind of have some sort of starting point where you know you can kind of fit something into something, it can really help.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes I will go into situations where I'll look at a timeline and I'll see a blank spot and I'll think, okay, now to fill in the blank spot. So it's kind of a jumping off point, and it is kind of a restriction because it's kind of putting together a puzzle. And I've always loved puzzles. So.
Yes, for sure. Well, now, almost all of your art is accompanied by a description or by some sort of writing. Which comes first? Like, do you get the idea and do you kind of like write out the description and then draw it? Or do you do the opposite?
It actually depends. So I've done some of both. And basically, I think the funny thing about art is the more you make, the more ideas you have. At least that's how it is for me. So sometimes I'll be writing, and as I'm writing, I'll come up with 5 different ideas for different stories. And of course, you have to make notes of them so you don't forget them.
Yes, very key.
Yes, you have to. And I learned that the hard way. By not writing things down, you lose it. But the same happens with my drawing. If I'm drawing something, a lot of times I'll have other ideas as I'm drawing. So I just have lists and lists and lists. I have probably 15 completely full notebooks of just ideas. And so if I'm in the mood to write or I'm in the mood to draw, I'll just pull out a notebook, find something that looks appealing, and then do it. So I'll either write the story first based on the idea that I wrote down, and then I'll draw something that goes with it, or vice versa. It's not really a set in stone type of technique. It's just whatever I feel like doing, I guess.
Right. Well, you and I are definitely on the same page in that regard, because whenever I start writing, the ideas do start flowing, and you might not even be writing. You just start getting ideas while you're watching TV or whatever. It's so important to get those ideas down, no matter what. Pause what you're doing and just get it down.
Yes.
If you have to fill up 15 notebooks, that's fine. Just like do yourself that service of getting them down. Now, my question for you is, because sometimes this frustrates me, because I have documents and documents of Microsoft Word documents that are just full of ideas. Does it ever frustrate you when you think about just the immense amount of ideas that you have and that like you probably won't have enough time to get to them in your lifetime? How do you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, that's definitely very frustrating. It's always funny to me when people have problems with not having ideas, because sometimes I just think, well, just do one thing, even if it doesn't sound great, and you probably will come up with more. But I think for me, it is very frustrating because I do have so many ideas and there's no way I will ever be able to do them all, ever. So I do tend to overload myself quite a bit where I'll set myself these huge lofty goals. And this year has been kind of extreme for that, because one of my major goals this year was to do new things. And so that just kind of opened the door for me to put even more on my plate than I already had. But to kind of deal with it, I guess you just have to look at one thing at a time. And as frustrating as it can be to sometimes look at all of the everything, and like you said, the immense number, that's basically why I called it the World of Immensum. Immensum is Latin for immense. It just means very large. So I think it's just a matter of trying to focus on the things that are most important to you. Even though I have 15 notebooks full of things, not all of those ideas are good. You know, I wrote them down because I didn't want to forget them, but sometimes it was 2 a.m. and I woke up and I wrote something down and I thought it was genius. And then I woke up the next morning and I was just like, what was I thinking? That's the worst idea I've ever heard.
Been there. Sometimes it is better to forget them.
Yes, exactly. But it is just a matter of getting them down anyways. And also something I've found with writing especially, sometimes multiple ideas come together. So I might write down an idea now that will kind of combine with something I wrote down 6 years ago, which will combine with something I wrote down 2 years ago, and it will actually create a unique concept. You know, one of the ideas might have been terrible, one of them might have been kind of cliched, and the other might be a little original, but altogether it's a combination of things that hasn't existed before. So just because an idea isn't necessarily relevant now doesn't mean that it won't be later.
I could not agree more. Yeah. And then you have that arsenal of things to go back to. Even if you just want to like spend an hour and just look through your old ideas, you can start to, like you said, see the combination, see where things can fit together, where one idea is just like a sleeper cell waiting for you to have this other idea, or it could spark a new idea because of all the new things that you've done in the meantime to just get things really blasting off.
Absolutely.
Well, and I want to actually ask you about that. So tell me more about this doing new things goal that you had.
Oh, yes. Okay. So basically what had happened was after I quit my job as a cook, I had a little bit of a period where I was kind of recovering. Because I had fallen into kind of a pretty intense depression, I needed some time to figure out what was happening, I guess. I was trying to reevaluate and figure things out from there. So that was basically my recovery year, was last year. And then this year, I thought, well, I've kind of been, I don't know if slacking is the right word, but I wasn't being adventurous enough. And I think to a certain extent, that is part of what my personality has kind of always been. It's not that I'm not a leader because I can be if I'm in a situation where I need to be, where people aren't doing what they need to be doing and nobody else is taking charge. I will come in and kind of control the situation a little bit, but it's not very natural to me. It's not natural to me to reach out to people first. It's not natural to me to apply to things that I might get rejected for. I think it's a protective mechanism to a certain extent. I don't want to be rejected, so
Sure.
I just kind of don't try.
Yeah.
And although that's great in theory, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't take steps to get there. So, yeah, one of my big goals for this year was just to try new things. I did multiple craft shows this year, and I had never done that before. One of them was just whatever space was available, so it was like a first come, first serve kind of thing. But the second one you actually had to be accepted for. And I think for me that was a moment of, oh, people actually like what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, my art and my fiction has always been something that I do for me. And I think that's important. You know, I don't think we should do our creative things for other people. But it is encouraging, you know, when you see that people actually like what you do. So when I apply for things that are selective, where hundreds of people apply and only, in this case, I think 60 were chosen, and I was one of the people that were chosen, that was very encouraging because it made me feel like I was doing something right, I guess. But yeah, it was just me trying to push the boundaries of what I was capable of and basically push my comfort zone because I was getting kind of sick and tired of being in my comfort zone. And I really wanted to make this work, you know, my art, and it hadn't quite taken off. And it was me recovering, but I had also been trying to work on gaining some traction. You know, I was very lucky that my parents let me stay at home and work on it because I was still young. But I was personally starting to get very discouraged because I thought, well, now I'm just going to have to go get another job where I'm going to have to follow people that I don't agree with because they think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to be able to do my artwork anymore. And that was kind of terrifying, I guess. And so because of that, when the beginning of 2018 rolled around, I thought, okay, this year it's kind of do or die. And this was personally my own doing. You know, this wasn't my parents because they had seen that I was trying to do things. You know, I was working hard, but it was a personal decision where I thought, okay, I need to do things. And, you know, some of those things I haven't heard back from people yet. Some of those things, for example, I had a novella that I wrote, a sci-fi novella.
Oh, cool.
And I submitted it to a publisher. I haven't heard back from them, but, you know, it's my first time, even though I've been writing since I was 13, full-length, 50,000-word novels. It was my first time ever sending something to a publisher because I was scared. You know, I'm still kind of pretty convinced they're going to say no. But I figure if I prepare for the worst and I say, well, they're definitely going to say no, then I'll be less discouraged if they do. And if they don't and they actually say yes, then I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Right. From one writer to another, prepare yourself because the rejections are many, no matter how good you are.
High. Exactly. You know, I've heard Stephen King, Carrie was rejected like 30 times or something.
Yeah.
And now no one would even dream of rejecting a Stephen King novel because they're going to sell.
Right.
But I am pretty much prepared for that. But in terms of doing new things, I'm pretty happy that I even took that leap.
And congratulations to you, because I think it's one of the hardest things in life for anybody, whether they're creative or not, is to put themselves in an uncomfortable situation, because most of the time that means that the uncomfortable situation you're putting yourself in is a test for your future self, somewhere that you want your future self to be, and that's maybe a gatekeeper or an opportunity that requires you to put yourself in that uncomfortable situation to get past. I've done this uncomfortable, I can never say it, but an uncomfortability calendar where I do one uncomfortable thing a day, whether it's a big thing or a little thing, or if it takes multiple days, I kind of cheat. And like if it's like a letter that I have to write to somebody, I'll take a couple days to do that. But either way, like I check it off every single day to give anything that gives myself that nervous energy to do it, because it's so important. Because I think that nervous energy, the thing that you're scared of, is always something that's probably going to be good for you. And it is scary to put yourself in that situation where you're able to be rejected, where you're able to not have somebody write back to you, and it does give you that tinge of, oh, maybe I'm not worthy. But most of the time it's just because it's not the right fit, or they literally don't read it, or anything other than you're not, eligible, or you're not worthy. But you can never get that confirmation from the universe that you are worthy and that it is the right path unless you put yourself in that situation, unless you try. And it's really hard, but you just got to try and try and try again.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I like the idea of a calendar. I might have to steal that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's just really hard to say for me for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try.
Okay. So, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing your story. But before I let you go, it's time for the final push. And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, so I kind of thought a lot about what I wanted to say here. And I think the primary thing that I want to get across is that it doesn't matter if it's bad at first. Because if you're just getting into creative things, or even if you aren't, you're still going to probably have bad days. Everybody has them. But if you can push past your bad days, or your bad beginnings, or your bad anything, you will make progress and you will get better. And it's just a matter of getting over that idea of perfection. And I'm definitely a perfectionist at my very core. I want everything to be perfect. But if you get too focused on everything being perfect, I personally fall victim to not doing anything at all. Because you want things to be so well refined that you never do anything. So find what you like to do, whether it be music or drawing or cosplay or anything. Find what you like to do and let yourself be bad. And eventually you will progress and you will get better.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's finding that thing and deciding to not be, middle of the road, like you were saying before, picking that path that will bring you joy, even if you do suck at it, even if you are bad at first, and really committing and going for it and spending that free time to do it.
Yes.
Excellent. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for giving us that push. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah. And you can find Jordan on worldofimmensum.com. That's IMMENSUM.com. And we'll have everywhere else you can find Jordan at yourcreativepush.com/Jordan Hill. Jordan, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jordan for coming on the show, and for also giving me the opportunity here at the end of the episode to remind you to write your ideas down. This is a public service announcement that I give often, and I love giving because I think it's like my thesis. Write those ideas down, get them out of your head, and get them down on paper. Like Jordan said, even if an idea isn't ready now, that doesn't mean it won't be ready in the future, in the near future or in the distant future. Just get it down so that it is a physical thing out in the world. I can't say that enough, and I'm going to keep reminding you because I think it's so important. But the main thing I wanted to get to from this episode was how inspired I felt by Jordan with the whole NaNoWriMo thing. First of all, I know how hard it is to write that many words in 1 month, especially when it's words that are related to one thing, like writing a book with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and piecing that all together. But to do it multiple years in a row, and then to get to that year where you have so many other things going on, you have a job, you're taking classes. For other people, maybe you have kids, maybe you have other life responsibilities, and this thing that was once kind of difficult for you to do, but you still did it, and now you have all these extra things. You get this prejudgment that you're not going to be able to do it, and for many people, that's a good enough excuse to just throw in the towel before you even start. And you can't do that. You can't set limits on yourself before you even try to do something, because you are way more powerful than you think you are. You have way more motivation if you really want to get this thing done. If this thing is very important to you, to do NaNoWriMo or to do whatever project it is that you are limiting yourself before you even try it, you are doing yourself a disservice. And congratulations to Jordan for doing it and for inspiring us that just because you have new stressors in your life and you're feeling emotionally stressed about those things, sometimes getting back to your roots, getting back to this thing that used to bring you joy, this big project that you felt a great sense of accomplishment after you were done, sometimes that's the thing that will motivate you to figure out all the other things in your life, to move all the other things in your life around that thing, and to get it done, and to get it done in epic fashion by doing double the word count or whatever it may be. Don't limit yourself. Don't stop yourself before you even start a thing. Don't make excuses of not having enough time or not having enough energy before you even try it once. Go for it, and even if you fall short, at least you have started the thing and you can finish it next month. You can find a way to get it done. Just get going. On our next episode, we have Adam Wilbur. Adam is a magician who loves creativity. He was on Penn and Teller's Fool Me, and he fooled them. It was awesome. Right after he fooled them, he had this great little speech about creativity and how important creativity is to him. And he comes on the show next week to talk about creating magic tricks, his magic, and how you can use your creativity to create some magic in your life and art. If you want to find out more about Adam or check out his magic or his creativity books, you can head to his website, adamwilber.com, W-I-L-B-E-R, or on Instagram, he is Adam Wilbur. Or you can head to today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/313. We'll have everything we talked about with Jordan today, as well as links to Adam's stuff, and also that video of him fooling Penn and Teller. Definitely a great video to check out as homework before next week's episode. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your creative work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you guys so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.